you ready?
Hello and welcome to our Charter Road Hospitality Studios here at the Town Place Suites in Oxford. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline. What's up? I'm your host, Browning Stubbs. Great to be back with you on this week's edition of Hotty Toddy Hotline, where we're going to preview the SEC tournament. The Ole Miss Rebels are coming into the tournament as the number 7 seed. They will play the number 10 seed Alabama Crimson Tide Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Time in Nashville, part of the SEC tournament at Bridgestone Arena. We're going to break down the Crimson Tide and talk about what Ole Miss did to earn the 7th seed. Plus, Ole Miss baseball, they are hot this season. 10-1 on the year for the Ole Miss Rebels. Just got a sweep over the weekend in South Carolina, as Ole Miss got 3 huge wins against Ball State, Coastal Carolina, and Cincinnati in the Chanticleer Classic in Conway, South Carolina. Also, some other sports that are going on. Spring football began last week, had some drama. One player was arrested. We'll get to that and then talk about some of the full list of allegations that came out from Ole Miss football. So we've got a jam-packed week for you on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and make sure you turn your radio up, keep the TV on, because we got Breck Jones coming in to talk about Ole Miss baseball and much more. So you don't want to miss Breck and this whole show on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'll be right back.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back in the Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're now joined on the phone with RebelWatch's Breck Jones. Breck, how's it going?
Doing great today, Browning. How are you?
Good. I'm Browning Stubbs, everyone, and it's great to be with Breck. Now, Breck, let's get to Ole Miss baseball. The Ole Miss baseball team, I mentioned it in the open, they're 10-1. They are on a hot streak. Just got a sweep in the Chanticleer Classic, defeated Ball State 7-3. With another win by Brady Bramlett, and Ole Miss got a big win from number 18 Coastal Carolina on Saturday. They win that one 8-2. They're 3-1 versus ranked teams, and we saw another great pitching performance. Chad Smith picked up the win, and that one. And then, of course, on Sunday, the Rebels sweep the tournament, beating Cincinnati in that one 7-1. Sean Johnson now 3-0. On the season. Well, what a turnaround from last year. All right, Breck, let's break down what you saw from this weekend from Ole Miss baseball.
I think you just saw an improvement, a continued improvement in the pitching staff. You saw starting pitchers going deeper into games like Brady Bramlett going 6 innings, which is something you really need this year if you want to succeed. You don't want to have to get deep into your bullpen on Friday night. And that's something they were able to avoid this weekend, and they got out of the weekend without having to use their setup man or their closer. That's pretty good if you can sweep the weekend without using your 2 guys at the end of the bullpen.
So, Breck, we're talking 10-1 already on the season. And last year, I'm looking at the schedule, Ole Miss did not get their 10th win until March the 18th. So they are... they're a little bit above schedule from last year. You said the improved pitching is better, but also talk about what you've seen from some of the new and improved hitters.
I think that there's just more consistency so far from the hitters. You've seen guys step up in roles you thought they would assume, like J.D. Woodman's gotten off to a great start this year. Tate Blackman's had a good year after kind of struggling his freshman year last year. And, Colby Bortles had a good weekend, which is something that you needed to see out of him. Colby kind of struggled up to this point, but he had a 2-run homer, I think, on Friday, and maybe had a couple more doubles over the weekend. And he had a good weekend, too. But there's some young guys in Ryan Olenek and just a few other guys like that that are really contributing so far. 1 through 5, I think that they're really, really good. And the rest of the lineup's fine, but 1 through 5 is pretty dangerous and hard for a pitcher to get through.
Yeah, and, let's kind of look at some of the stats, Breck. We see Ole Miss, on the season, just, like you said, very consistent. Tate Blackman, what a year for him, batting .378, and J.B. Woodman, .333. So there, we've seen a vast improvement, from this team. 10-1 on the season, 3-1 against ranked opponents. Now coming up this week, they are playing, a home series. They'll play 2 games against Southeast Missouri coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then a weekend series against Grambling State. Last year, Breck, we saw Ole Miss really just give up on a lot of these weekday games and stuff. They would just lose them. I don't know why that happened, but when you've beaten good teams like Louisville, beat Memphis, beat Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati, all that, what's the mindset heading into these next 5 home games against teams that you frankly should beat by like 5 runs each?
You just got to stay locked in because baseball's a funny game, and you never know when you run into a pitcher who's just slowing people down or getting people out. And of course, you should win, but I think baseball is just that sport where anything could happen and anybody can lose any given day. But they need a little more consistency from their weekday pitching. If you could find a flaw so far, it's maybe that James McArthur, the guy that they've gone with during the weekday games, hasn't had a great start to the year so far. I don't think he's been able to get out of really the second inning for either one of his starts, and just really has been rough. And he's a freshman. I'm sure he'll come around, but this week will be interesting with the 2 midweek games before a weekend series, how they kind of handle the pitching staff like that.
And Breck, when we look across the SEC, I really don't know if there's a lot to take away from the first couple weeks of the season, because Florida's 12-1, Vanderbilt's 10-1, Texas A&M's 10-1, Missouri's 11-3, South Carolina's 10-2, Alabama's 10-2, Arkansas's 10-2. Everyone's winning. So I wouldn't say that a team's really separated themselves from the pack yet. But overall, Ole Miss is a team that should be right there till the very end. With a lot of these competitive teams. Overall, though it is very early, but who do you kind of see as the Rebels' main challenger going into conference play, which will start March the 18th?
I think what you're seeing is really that the SEC is just really loaded this year, particularly in the SEC West. The West just looks like a gauntlet right now. I think Missouri, they'll kind of fade. They've got a few good starting pitchers there, but I don't know that their offense is consistent enough to keep up with what they've done so far when they get into conference play. But I think you look at Texas A&M, I think they're going to be probably the team to beat in the West, and LSU is always really good. I think that Arkansas can pitch it pretty well this year. State's going to be a scrappy team that's going to win a few series that they shouldn't probably. State's down there right now, but they played some tough games. They went on a road trip out to Dodger Stadium this week and played USC and Oklahoma and some other teams out there. But I think the team to beat in the East is probably Vanderbilt, but Florida's on up there too. You can't ever count out Florida. Florida's got so much talent on that team. They're loaded down with minor leaguers right now.
All right, let's take a break on Hotty Toddy Hotline. When we come back, we are going to stay on the phone with Breck Jones to talk about some Ole Miss football as they enter another week of spring football practice. Keep it here. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm Browning Stubbs on the phone with Breck Jones of RebelWatch. Breck, talk baseball. Let's get into some football. Last week, we saw some controversy with Ole Miss football with defensive lineman Breland Speaks getting arrested for a DUI. That's he's not the first player that's happened to from Ole Miss, but how do you think Hugh Freeze will approach this in the future? Certainly you can give him a slap on the wrist and have him skip the first game of the season, but I don't know. I mean, do you think Ole Miss should do more, considering that this is not the first time that something like this has happened?
I think it's a little tougher to punish a guy more strictly than you have in the past, just because you kind of set a precedent with how you handle that. And, maybe he goes on the mission trip or something to Haiti this year. Maybe he does sit out the first game, but I don't know that it's so much of a problem here. It's more so than it is anywhere else. I mean, DUI is a fairly common thing. I mean, it's stupid. But in a college town, there's a bunch of them given out every weekend. So I don't see him punishing him any worse than he has handled it in the past.
So last week, you attended the spring practice, and we got to hear Coach Freeze and Chad Kelly speak to the media about what's happening in this spring. Certainly Shea Patterson, we found out he looks very good, very mobile. He's wearing number 20 for Ole Miss. So what can you tell us about, some of the differences from last year to now?
Before we get into that, what do you think about Shea wearing 20?
It's a little odd because I'm used to quarterbacks only wearing numbers 1 through 19. But, I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, it's kind of like what's the guy from Longest Yard? Paul Crewe. He wore the number 22.
Yeah. I think if you do a number above 20, I think 22 looks a little better because of him and because of Doug Flutie. But
yeah,
it's interesting. I think he's paying homage to his grandfather that played for the Pistons or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but anyway, to go back to your first question, what looks different? I think it's going to be a different team with the leadership kind of wise. Your leaders are kind of your best players, and you're losing a few guys like that, and Laramie and Laquan and, Robert, for good or bad, he was one of the best players, so people are going to look up to him and what he does. So I think that the leadership will be a little different. I think overall, the team will be pretty good. I mean, they may not have as much top-end talent, but maybe they can be better as a team.
So, of course, going into spring practice, the biggest question is, what's our biggest weakness? So for Ole Miss, questions, like you said, with Tunsil gone, there might be a hole in the offensive line. Defensive line with Robert Condici gone. But in your opinion, what's the biggest hole on this football team?
I think left tackle is probably your biggest hole right now because, they have a deep receiving core with 4- and 5-star guys, a lot of talent there. They have defensive lineman depth, and I think the defense will be pretty good. They got those transfers coming in at linebacker. I think the defense will be fine. But, I think left tackle is the biggest hole right now just because it's a question mark. I mean, you got the number 1 tackle in the country in Greg Little, but he's still a freshman. I mean, everybody thinks he'll be good and everything, but until he gets here and you really see, then I think it's still a question mark.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that Greg Little can step into Laramie's role, as Tunsil did pretty well as a freshman. Now, another hole in offense is running back. Jalen Walton leaving. Now it comes down to really Akeem Judd versus Jordan Wilkins. Wilkins, I mean, I saw him play in high school Breck every week, and this kid was a monster, one of the fastest guys I've ever seen. Then had a knee injury in high school that really it's affected him in college. Trust me, I've noticed that. And Akeem Judd, I mean, I thought we did see some promising things in small sample sizes last year. I mean, so right now, would you give the edge to Judd, or do you think it's still going to be a committee-type running game?
I don't know that you'll ever see one guy get 25 carries a game in Hugh Freeze's offense. But I think, the guy that runs out there first, I don't know that it really matters if it's Wilkins or Judd. I think Judd is kind of the guy that you might rely on a little more at this point, just because he did show a lot there towards the end of the year, particularly from the Auburn game on, and he had a good game against Mississippi State, and he showed a little more breakaway speed, I think, than maybe Wilkins did, but he also showed the ability that he has power and can run between the tackles. So I think he'll probably be the main guy, but they're both going to get a ton of carries.
And there's also some other things going on in spring practice. There's let's talk a little bit more about Shea Patterson and the backup quarterback position. I mean, Chad Kelly is going to be the starter, no questions asked. Is already up on the Heisman boards for next year. But as far as the backup quarterbacks, I mean, I think you got to be feeling a little bit better than years past, and not having to rely on Ryan Buchanan versus Devonta Kincaid. But now the fact that you got Shea Patterson and possibly a guy in Jason Pellerin that could be a good player as well. So who do you kind of see having the lead there on that backup role?
That's a tough one. Maybe if Shea didn't come in early, you'd say it was Jason, just because he's been in here in the program for a year, and maybe he would get the nod at backup. But since Shea's going through spring and figuring out the playbook and all that maybe it's Shea. But I think either way, I think that they'll both get to see a few snaps here and there in some of those games. It might be a blowout, and I think you do feel a little more comfortable with those guys. I think they fit the offense a little better than either Ryan or Devontae. And, Pellerin, they say, has really improved this past year. He took that redshirt year and really used it to better himself and become a little more accurate, which was a little bit of his problem coming in. But he's a big kid, and, maybe they have a package for him to run, kind of like they did with Barry Bernetti, and try to get him some snaps like that.
Breck, I want to bring some up that you just talked about. In Hugh Freeze's offense, you're not going to have a guy that gets 20 to 25 carries. I mean, do you see that as kind of maybe a problem for Ole Miss? Because, yes, they've improved every single year since Freeze has been the coach, and I think they're sniffing that chance to win the West and possibly be in the college football playoff. But you see it. The teams that are in the SEC title games are teams with running backs, from Alabama's Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, Derrick Henry, Georgia with, whether it's Nick Chubb or Todd Gurley, with Auburn, Trey Mason. So, I mean, there's, teams that make it that far usually have good running backs. I mean, is that a position that you think that Freeze could really develop more this season?
Yeah, I think it's something he'll work on, and I think he likes to try to stay balanced. But maybe if he had a superstar running back in the backfield like a Fournette or like a Derrick Henry, that maybe he would rely on the running game more, and you'd see a guy get more like 20 to 25 carries. But when those guys that you have are good, but they're just above average SEC backs, maybe you're going to do the by committee thing, then maybe you don't rely on it as heavy, especially when you have a playmaker at quarterback like Chad. And Chad, who ran for 500 yards himself last year, he has to be accounted for. And I think that opens up. You saw him run better later in the year, obviously when Laramie came back. But also they opened up the playbook more with Chad and quarterback runs. And so somebody would have to stay out there on Chad because he would pull the ball and he'd take off for 20 yards here and there.
Breck, just want to ask you one more question with Ole Miss basketball. We just talked about it in our previous segment, but they play Alabama, and then they got to play Kentucky. Certainly, you could say that Ole Miss got the worst part of the draw, being on the side of the bracket with Kentucky. But really, I mean, that's the only way you're going to get in the conversation is by beating them. So do you kind of see this happening where Ole Miss beats Bama and then unfortunately falls to Kentucky?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way it's going to play out. It's just tough to see that the Rebels beating Kentucky as bad as they got beat earlier in the year. And it's going to be a home game for Kentucky. I mean, all their fans show up to the SEC tournament. They even go to games that Kentucky's not playing in. And I think it's a very, very poor matchup for Ole Miss, the way that they are on the post and inside. They're just going to get dominated on the boards. And I just don't see that as a very good matchup for the Rebels.
Breck, I want to thank you for coming on Hotty Toddy Hotline this week. We talked Ole Miss baseball, talked spring football, and you chimed in on what you thought about the Rebels in the SEC tournament. Breck, thank you, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Yeah, thanks, man. Anytime.
That's Breck Jones of RebelWatch. Breck Jones has joined us on Hotty Toddy Hotline before, and we really thank him for coming back on the show this week. All right, well, coming up, we have more sports that we're going to get to in Hotty Toddy Hotline. Stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
All right, welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. Let's get into the show. We're going to talk Ole Miss basketball. Let's recap what happened with them last week. And Ole Miss basketball, they played a couple games last week. They had senior night, and boy, was it a great one as Ole Miss defeated Mississippi State. And it was the Stefan Moody game, a 86-78 victory for the Rebels. Stefan Moody had a career night, scoring 43 points. And it was incredible. Moody had 24 of those 43 in the first half. Ole Miss really controlled this game from the very start. And Sebastian Saiz also added 10 points in the game as the Ole Miss Rebels just got a big win, sending off the seniors Martavius Newby, Sebastian Saiz, Anthony Perez, and Moody, of course. So it was a great win for Ole Miss. Really controlled the game, like I said. Moody just couldn't miss. MSU coach Ben Hallen just said, we tried to double team him, but we couldn't figure him out. He just let loose, and he was just great. Ole Miss got a huge win, obviously, beating their in-state rival Mississippi State and kind of shutting up Malik Newman a little bit. He kind of bragged about going to Mississippi State, and he hasn't had that great of a year, honestly. So Newman played 12 minutes and scored just 3 points in the game. So then the question was, could Ole Miss go on the road and get a win against a road team? They've only done it twice this year in conference play, as they beat Auburn and then they beat Missouri. But Ole Miss did what they had to do. They got win number 20 on the season. They beat Tennessee 83-60, blew them out. I mean, what an impressive win for the Ole Miss Rebels. It was a huge win, a really collective effort that we saw from Ole Miss. I mean, everyone contributed to this victory. Saiz had 23 points, 11 rebounds, his 8th double-double of the season. And Moody had 12 points for the Rebels. Tomas Giello at 16. Martavius Newby scored 10. It really was just an awesome game for Andy Kennedy and the Rebels. Ole Miss got, like I said, their 20th win, which was Andy Kennedy's 8th win, his 8th 20th win season. So, but prior to Andy Kennedy coming to Ole Miss just had 7 20-plus win campaigns and 96 seasons before Kennedy's arrival. So, I mean, that just shows he's the best coach in Ole Miss history. The fact that he's won 20 games 8 times compared to when he took the job, they had just done that 7 times. So, congrats to Andy Kennedy and Ole Miss as they picked up a huge win. Ole Miss finishes the regular season as the number 7 seed in the SEC tournament. They were tied with Georgia in the standings, but since Ole Miss and Georgia split 1-1, they had to go to the next tiebreaker, which was a mutual opponent that both teams played. Had to be South Carolina. Georgia beat South Carolina. Ole Miss didn't. But yeah, so Ole Miss finishes 20-11 in the conference. Overall, the conference play was 9-8. So really a decent regular season. I mean, certainly there were some head scratchers in this season, starting with loss to George Mason and Seton Hall. 2 really bad losses there. But then, when you get to conference play, really the two games they flat out lost that they should have won, in my opinion, were South Carolina, but Stefan Moody tore his hamstring in the game. And then they should not have lost to Mississippi State and Starkville either. So, Ole Miss is now in a position where if they maybe had those 2 conference wins, then they would probably be right on the bubble. But unfortunately, Ole Miss has to get back in the conversation by playing Alabama. Now, Alabama is a team that we saw Ole Miss beat on the opening at the Pavilion. They beat the Crimson Tide 74-66. So Ole Miss is certainly capable of playing with Alabama. I mean, we've seen it in the past, and this is going to be a huge game for Alabama because Alabama is a team that's right on the bubble. They are a team that is desperate for a win. As Alabama, when we kind of check out the bubble watch, their RPI is 63, and they're a team that's had some decent wins. When you look at their schedule, Alabama finished the year 17-13 and finished 8-10 in conference play. So, Alabama they've lost 4 out of their last 5 conference games. So right now, they are desperate to try to get a win. I mean, really, this game, yes, it means a lot to Ole Miss, but it probably means more to Alabama, since Alabama legit has a chance to get back on the bubble if they can beat Ole Miss. But it's going to be a tough task. Alabama, a team that's struggling, Ole Miss could take advantage of that, but it's going to be a really fantastic game on Thursday. The game is set for 6 p.m. on the SEC network. Ole Miss, of course, lost last year in the second round of the tournament to South Carolina on a heartbreaker, but still managed to make the NCAA tournament. I'll be at the game in Nashville. You can follow me at Browning Stubbs on Twitter. I'll be tweeting about it. But it's do or die for Ole Miss. If they want to make the tournament, I think they got to beat Alabama, and then frankly they got to beat Kentucky, which is going to be nearly impossible because like Breck Jones, who's going to be in our next segment, I spoke with him, and he told me that Kentucky fans travel to all their road games. I was there in Nashville last year for the tournament, and their fans were everywhere. So it's going to be basically another road game for Ole Miss. Going to be a tough task. But if Ole Miss wants to get back in the picture, they got to beat Alabama and then probably beat Kentucky as well. All right, well, we are going to talk more about the SEC tournament and some of the other teams in our next segment here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm Browning Stubbs. Let's talk more about the SEC tournament, and let's get to the entire bracket. As this might be a surprise to you guys, the number 1 seed is the Texas A&M Aggies. They finished 13-5 in conference play, tied with Kentucky, but their overall record was 24-7. The number 2 seed is Kentucky. Number 3 seed South Carolina. Number 4 is LSU. 5 seed is Vanderbilt. 6 seed is Georgia. 7 seed is Ole Miss, like I said. 8 is Florida. 9 is Arkansas. 10 is Alabama. 11 is Mississippi State. 12 is Tennessee. 13 is Auburn. Missouri would be the 14th, but they are ineligible due to the allegations against their basketball program. So A&M, Kentucky, South Carolina, and LSU both got the double bye, so they don't play until Friday. But on Thursday, we see Ole Miss will play Bama at 6 p.m., and the winner of that game will play Kentucky on Friday at 6 p.m. And then on the other part of that bracket, we got a Georgia-Mississippi State matchup. The winner of that will play South Carolina, and then, of course, the winner of that game will play the winner of Kentucky versus Ole Miss or Alabama. So it's for Ole Miss. Certainly, your odds are probably better if you're in that top part of the bracket. If they had maybe gotten if you think about it, South Carolina is the number 3 seed. Guess what? They finished 11-7 in conference play. If Ole Miss had just beaten South Carolina, they had that tiebreaker. Ole Miss has probably got a double bye. So really, Ole Miss they missed out by one conference game. I mean, losing to Georgia or whatever. It's really unfortunate how how Ole Miss just messed up in key moments, and this is what's cost them. But if Ole Miss, probably needs a win like Kentucky on their resume just to be even considered. So it's going to be a tall task. But honestly, if Ole Miss, beats Alabama, beats Kentucky, and this is a Kentucky team that's not as good, because they really don't have any guys that really stand out besides point guard Tyler Ulis and on their team. So it's a golden opportunity for Ole Miss to get in the conversation. But I think Ole Miss, if they can beat Kentucky, I think they're probably in the tournament, regardless of what happens after that. They might have to make the finals, but I was hoping Ole Miss wouldn't necessarily see Kentucky in the bracket, because that's just a game that scares you, having to play the Wildcats. So, but yeah, I mean, this is really what it comes down to. I mean, Ole Miss is probably going to the NIT, but you really never know. I mean, Kentucky, they've fallen in the past in the SEC tournament, so who's to say it can't happen again? Also, if you had won one more game, you possibly could have been a 5 seed, playing the top part of the bracket where you would play teams like Vanderbilt, A&M, or LSU, but they're not. So let's not talk what if, but let's just talk present. So yeah, Ole Miss, they play Alabama 6 o'clock on Thursday. They got to win that one. It's not going to be an easy game, as Alabama is still on the bubble. But then you gotta play your heart out against Kentucky. And Kentucky's a team, they are more than capable of getting beat. Problem is, it's just hard to see it happening in the SEC tournament because they are so good when they play there. And guys like Skal, Labrisier on their team are playing very good basketball as well. The road games that they've lost let's go by conference. So they lost at LSU, who's top 4 seed. Lost at Auburn. That was the worst loss of the season. Lost at Tennessee, which was very weird. Lost at Texas A&M, which was a reasonable loss, and lost at Vanderbilt, which was also a reasonable loss. But when you look at Tennessee, at Auburn, Kentucky lost both of those games. So certainly it could happen. You just got to catch them on a bad shooting night. But they're led by guards Jamal Murray and Tyler Ulis, and of course, I'm talking. If you're catching the show on a Friday, I'm basically previewing Kentucky, but Alabama, they're still a team. Ole Miss Thursday is going to have to really keep their eyes on, because they're a team that's big, that caused Ole Miss problems in the first half back at the Pavilion. But yeah, so the SEC, when we break it down, I mean, we think A&M's a lock, Kentucky's a lock, South Carolina probably is a lock, and right now I would say Vanderbilt is in the tournament. But teams like LSU and Florida are on the bubble. Alabama's on the outside looking in, so it's going to be a great tournament. A lot of things could happen, but it's going to be an interesting tournament, to see how many SEC teams will actually make the tournament. And of course, if you're Ole Miss, you don't just need to be watching the SEC tournament, but watch the other games as well, as Ole Miss will be looking across the nation at these other bubble teams. You got to hope that they will lose as well. So Ole Miss, they're a team. They're fun to watch, and could certainly cause problems if Stefan Moody can score 43 points and if Sebastian Sayes can give you a double-double. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Nashville for Ole Miss. And then, of course, when we look at the rest of college basketball, it'll be interesting to see who gets the top 4 seeds. I mean, I think if Kansas wins the Big 12, they will get a number 1 seed. If Villanova wins their conference championship, they'll be number 1 seed in the Big East. And then same with Michigan State if they win the Big Ten. And then really that last number 1 seed is going to be interesting. I would say the winner, we might see a Virginia or North Carolina win that. Maybe the winner of that, the ACC, will be the last number 1 seed, but we'll see. I'm very excited to see how the rest of the conference is going to shake out. Selection Sunday is next Sunday, so that will be on the 13th, and we'll find out just where all these teams stack up. If Ole Miss does make it, expect them to be, again, like a 11 or 12 seed. That's probably about the best that they'll be able to do. All right, well, that wraps up our SEC tournament recap. Now we're going to talk with Breck Jones. Breck's going to talk to us about spring football, Ole Miss baseball. Breck's going to have a lot to share with us on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We will be right back.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm your host, Browning Stubbs. We want to thank Breck Jones of RebelWatch for coming on. We learned a lot of things about Ole Miss football and Ole Miss baseball. They're 10-1, and he even gave his predictions on Ole Miss and Kentucky. My personal predictions, I agree with Breck. I think that they could beat Alabama, but I don't think they'll beat Kentucky. So, unfortunately, I think Ole Miss is going to be an NIT team. But if they beat Kentucky, I do see them possibly sneaking in the tournament. Follow Breck Jones on Twitter at BreckMJones. We want to thank Charter Road Hospitality for making this show happen. We are broadcasting this week's episode from the Town Place Suites in Oxford, located at 105 Ed Perry Boulevard. If you're in town for an NIT game coming up, or if you're in town to visit Swayze or double-deckers coming up, this is your place to be. Call the Town Place Suite 662-238-3522 105 Ed Perry Boulevard. The Hampton Inn at Oxford is right across the street from here, and you can call them at 662-234-5535, located at 103 Ed Perry Boulevard. A lot of entertainment around here. The Oxford Conference Center is right here. There is the Premier Lanes and movie theater over here, so there's a lot you can do over in this area. And of course, you go over to Jackson Avenue, 112 Heritage Drive. It's the Holiday Inn Express. Call them 662-236-2500. And then, of course, another Hampton Inn at 110 Heritage Drive. Call them 662-513-0340. And a lot of free breakfast that you guys can get, and it's all very fun here at Charter Road Hospitality. And we want to thank them once again for being our partners with CRM Sports and Hotty Toddy Hotline. So let's see what's coming up this week in Ole Miss sports. Basketball, big game Thursday in Nashville, Bridgestone Arena, SEC tournament. 6 o'clock tip-off between Ole Miss and Alabama. And then spring football practice will continue this week as the Ole Miss Rebels are practicing all throughout the week, and they'll have a media opportunity Thursday, March 10th at 4:30. That's open to the media as well. Pro Day for Ole Miss is March 28th. We really didn't talk a whole lot about that on this week's show because we've talked about it in our last couple week shows. But Pro Day is March 28th, 9 a.m. at the Manning Center. Closed to the general public, open to NFL personnel, media, and guests only. But it should be a great day for Ole Miss. Hopefully all these guys will improve their draft stock. We will have updates on Pro Day on Hotty Toddy Hotline later in the month of March. Other sports happening for Ole Miss baseball. Ole Miss athletics. Ole Miss baseball plays Southeast Missouri on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday's game 6:30. Wednesday's game's at 4 o'clock. Then a weekend series, 3-game series against Grambling State. Friday at 6:30. While Saturday and Sunday's games are at 1:30. Ole Miss women's basketball, they ended their season in the SEC tournament last week. They fell to Vanderbilt 74-59. Cendrika Sessom led the Rebels with 17 points. So a rebuilding team, a team that had no seniors. Hopefully they'll be better next season. Ole Miss tennis continues to play well as the Rebel Netters are 8-1 on the season. And they're coming off a home win last Sunday against Tennessee, winning in 5 sets, 4-1. Women's tennis, the Ole Miss women's tennis team, they are also playing really well. As ironically, they are also doing very well this season. So it's going to be interesting to see how the tennis team does. Golf, they're pretty good. We're going to have coverage of the Ole Miss golf team coming up as the Ole Miss women's golf team participates in the Rebel Intercollegiate. That's coming up the first week of April. So we will talk about that later in our future episodes. And that's a really cool tournament you guys should go support if you are in town. So big week. Ole Miss athletics got some baseball in town. We got some basketball in Nashville. If you can make the road trip, please do. Spring football is rocking and rolling, so it's in great weather. And it's if you stay here at Town Place Suites, go outside the pool and just really enjoy everything. It's great spring weather. Double deckers coming up, so a great time to be an Ole Miss sports fan and a great time to listen to Hotty, Toddy Hotline. Well, it was a great show this week. We previewed Alabama for the SEC tournament. We talked about the Ole Miss baseball team and their big weekend in South Carolina, and we talked about spring football and much, much more. All right, well, we want to thank Breck Jones for coming on the show this week. Follow him on Twitter at BreckMJones. And also I want to thank my executive producer, John Raw, on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we'll be back next week as John will be hosting the show. So you've been listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline, a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Reb Radio Network. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys next week.